Interesting. I was in a class recently and they were talking about how, well, yeah, but we have an exception on this particular stock because the client bought the stock like 30 years ago and they don't want to pay the capital gains because it's going to be huge. So imagine somebody who bought, say, Apple or Microsoft 30 years ago, and then they never did anything with it. They're going to have a big tax.
Welcome to One Went the Other Way, a podcast about your journey and finances. I'm your host, James. We have Wanda and Peggy with us today, and we're talking about taxes. How fun.
Taxes. You cannot avoid taxes. Death and taxes, right? Let's go with
Death
this, right?
and taxes. They will always be there.
Right. The why of taxes, right? So let's just keep it in perspective. You're going to need to pay your taxes because you got to pay for government services and for social support systems. And it's going to be the case, right? Always.
Yeah, I think it's funny how people they want lots of one. And then they want to pay the least amount of possible. I mean, we all want to pay the least amount possible. I get that. But you got to pay.
Yeah, taxes are going to exist. I mean, like, what can a financial advisor do to help someone in their taxes?
Yeah. So let's provide a little bit more clarity on taxes, right? And let's hone down a little bit more on the income taxes. You see on your paycheck, right? You get your Social Security taxes, your Medicare taxes, and your federal taxes and your state taxes. Basically those four things, right? Very straightforward. Your income taxes is going to be in some tax bracket based on how much money you make. At certain levels, you'll pay more. Anywhere from 0%. Some people pay 0% federal taxes all the way up to 36%. And then there's another tax that we frequently see, and we normally will see that when we're doing our taxes, and that's the capital gains taxes. And capital gains taxes is separate from income tax. It kind of is an income, but it's a reflection of that money that we make from our investments when our investments grow.
There are two types of capital gains, correct? There's short-term and long-term.
Short-term and long-term, right? And so the long-term, this concept of I'm going to make an investment and I'm going to keep it for 13 months. Now, we're not tax professionals, so we always have to emphasize that. Yet, if it's a capital gains that's short-term, right, then it falls on the income tax side of your taxes. But if it's a long-term, right, then it falls as a capital gains. And interestingly enough, again, you can pay 0% on capital gains, 15% or 20%, depending on that income that you have. And so many of us only pay 15%. You could get a 24% income tax, right? But then only 15% on capital gains.
Right. I think that it's kind of important to talk about who this matters to. I mean, I get that it matters to everybody, but it's like there's a group of people also that get really caught up in the charges and I don't want to pay. And then there's I don't want to pay for my taxes and so all of that, we understand you want to pay only your share, right? Nobody wants to pay extra. I get that. But when you talk about capital gains taxes, how many people in the average American, how much of that is going to be super important to them? I understand if you have like $3 million in investments that, capital gains could be a significant amount of your income. And at some point in your life too, right? So later in your life, capital gains might be more important because you have less of your regular income, right? And you're taking money out of your investments. So I think it's kind of important to talk about who does this really matter to? Like when do we need to start worrying about that?
Well, you should, I don't know that you should ever worry about it, but you should think about it, right? And talking with a financial advisor can help you navigate that. So if I'm taking money out of my investments, right, it can come in the form of capital gains, which is a lower tax rate than if I'm taking money out, say, from my IRA, which potentially would have a higher tax rate because the IRA in general would be on the income side. And so it would be taxed at your income tax band. So even the differences between how I take my money out of investments in order to minimize my taxes in any given tax year, depending on what's going on, talking to your financial advisor. And we think about those things. If I'm funding your standard of living, how am I doing it? And am I doing it in a tax efficient way? Can I do it from a capital gains at a lower tax rate versus an income? And is that to your advantage?
Right.
Well, I have a question that comes to my mind. As a young person, I've been blessed to start investing earlier than I would say the majority of Americans. We talk about dollar cost averaging. We talk about, you're putting money in your non-retirement account every month. And let's say something happens. Let's say there's like an emergency and you need to pull from it. If I've had this account open for a while, but I've been contributing, how do you know how it calculates? If I were to say make a trade and sell, is it going to be a long term or short term? Is it going to be first in, first out, last in, first out? How does it know if it's a long term capital gain or a short term capital gain?
That's a funny question that you asked. About, 2025, about 15 years ago, the federal government mandated that investment companies tell you what kind of gain that you have so that you could report it accurately. In years past, it was self-reported. You could say long-term, short-term. It was self-reported. But all this almost does not matter because the investment company is going to tell you if it's a short-term, if it's a long-term. And when you're talking to your financial advisor and something comes up, that speed bump, we can help navigate, okay, how is the best source to get this to minimize your taxes, looking at your big picture. Again, you're going to pay taxes. If you have the fortune of making money, you will pay taxes. That's it. If you've had the fortune to make money. And I think we forget about that.
That's what I'm saying. Don't get caught up in, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to pay capital gain tax if I take the money there. Or if I put it in an account, I'm going to have to pay capital gains. Yes, you are. But remember, you're only going to have to pay capital gains on your actual gains.
On the money that you made.
Right? So you're making money.
Which is another interesting thing. Oh my gosh, I'm getting double taxed. No, you are not getting double taxed. You actually get credit for any money. If you made income, $100, and you put it in your investment, the $100, then you cashed out $110. You actually get credit for the taxes that you paid on the $100 that you put in the account because that was already taxed as income, and you only pay taxes on that extra $10 or that capital gain. If you hold it long term, it's at lower 0 or 15% at times 20% rate. Right. But you're making money.
I think another thing that people don't understand is, okay, so I have a non-investment account and at the end of the year I get 1099. And the 1099 has capital gains, dividends, and interest, right?
Right.
And it's all there on my 1099 and I just let, my tax software pull it all in. Okay, that's great.
Right.
But I think what people don't understand is, but I didn't get the money.
Oh, right.
And that's correct. You didn't get the money, but you did. You got additional shares into your account, and that is where the money is. So when you're reinvesting your dividends, interest, and your capital gain, right, it's all just getting reinvested.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another thing. And you're not going to get taxed on that again later because then again, like Wanda said, it's there. You paid tax on it. So now that becomes part of, let's just call it principal, even though that's not really the correct term for it, but that's your cost basis, right?
That's
your cost basis goes up. So that's, I think, another thing that people tend to not realize. So when you cash out, like you said, James, you're putting money in on a monthly basis, say, and then you don't take money out for years and years and years. That doesn't mean that you're going to have to pay tax on all the gains, because you have been doing it each year as time goes by. Well, in a lot of accounts, because some accounts, some people will buy one thing and hold it for a really, really long time.
Sure.
Interesting. I was in a class recently and they were talking about how, but we have an exception on this particular stock because the client bought the stock like 30 years ago. And they don't want to pay the capital gains because it's going to be huge. So imagine somebody who bought, say, Apple or Microsoft 30 years ago, and then they never did anything with it. They're going to have a big tax. But then I feel like, now they're like really restricted, right?
Yeah.
They're not using it. So now they're just thinking, if I do, I'm going to have to pay tax on that money.
But if you're only making your investment decisions based on taxes, that's not necessarily a good idea. So, and again, right, it's a balanced approach. Taxes are inevitable. And so you want to think about it in a planned sort of way. So there will be times, and we call that unrealized capital gains. It's out there and you're going to have to pay taxes on it. When do you pay taxes on it? How does it serve you best in your finances to pay taxes? Maybe you sell them periodically to fund something different. Maybe you rebalance it. To another point, the biggest mistake a lot of investors make is they don't sell soon enough. Again, talking to your financial advisor, is I see that I have this unrealized capital gain that has this tax liability to me. Is this a time to sell some of it? Maybe not all of it, right? It doesn't have to be 100% to help ameliorate or reduce that effect at a later time.
Right.
I do want to bring up, for those that may not know, what is the difference between an unrealized gain versus a realized gain? I feel like we've talked about that before, and some people may not know what that means.
Unrealized gain is the change in the market value of something, right? So I bought this stock, I paid $100. Today's market value is $200, but I haven't sold it yet. I have an unrealized gain of $100. If I sell that stock today, I have a realized gain of $100.
So you don't pay taxes until it's realized.
That's right. You don't pay taxes until it's realized, right? So then if I get a dividend on that stock, so then if I have $200 of value in there and they give me a dividend of, $20, I pay tax on that $20. So now my cost base for that $200 stock, it's $220 now, right? And then the cost base would be $120 because I paid tax on that.
Yeah. And a dividend is taxed at an income tax rate, not a capital gains rate. So, in general, you'd rather be taxed on the capital gains side than on the dividend side. Yet both make up your portfolio, right? Both dividends and capital gains. You just want to be mindful of that.
Right. And I think we should kind of go back because we're getting really technical here. So we have a lot of different tools and knowledge of how you're going to do distributions and rebalancing your portfolio. Wanda had mentioned that it could cause you to have realized gains. That's true. Yes. But it also is an incremental way for you to be paying taxes so that when you retire, you're not having all these long-term capital gains that happen to where you're like, I don't want to sell that because, maybe it's time to sell it, but I'm going to have a $50,000 capital gain. So we have the knowledge to do that kind of different kinds of accounts is another way that we can help you with the taxes. Like Wanda said, which accounts are you going to take the money out of? If you take it out of your IRA, it's going to be, regular income. If you take it out of your non-retirement, then you may be paying capital gains taxes. There's, your 401ks. How does that come into play?
I want to address something here. We're talking a lot about the paying taxes on the other side, on the distribution side. On the aggregation side, on the side of where we're growing our accounts, this is another place that we like to look because we want you to shield as much money as you can from taxes in that it makes sense in your financial life. So if this year I can put money away in a retirement type vehicle, then it is important to do that if it can defer taxes and that serves me in the long run. So I can lower my tax liability in a current year by putting money into retirement accounts. And so let's say that I'm in the 24% tax bracket and I pay 6% state taxes, right? 30 cents. I put $1 into my retirement account, my 401k over here, and that allows me to not pay those taxes. And that gives me another 30 cents potentially to invest. So it increases my investment power. So we also look as we grow our investments, how the best way is to minimize taxes as long as it serves you in the long term, because things you're doing today are helpful in the long term. And so the type of accounts, Peggy, is what you're saying. And that's important both on the way in and on the way out. and then the timing, right? Not timing the market, the timing and planning on how you're going to pay taxes because you will in fact pay taxes.
Right.
And it's inevitable. And I want to actually add one more. There's another one that a lot of people don't know about. It's the net investment tax, which we talked income tax, we talk capital gains. This is a consideration, right? Again, given that you're going to pay taxes. But if you're single and you make over $200,000 or you're a married couple and make over $250,000, right? You're going to pay an additional 3.8% net investment tax. Most people don't even know it's in there. It's a little, but it adds up. So you want to, again, it adds up. You want to be mindful. Is it affecting you? And is this something that you need to look at? On the aggregation side, can I eliminate that tax from my financial plan by doing things like a retirement plan, a charitable deduction, any of a myriad of things that will help get you underneath that bar?
Right. Yeah. So we have in our tool chest, right? Mm-hmm. We have the different types of accounts. the different types of distributions, what your distribution plan is. So if you're about to retire, then ideally you've been working with somebody for a while, so they've been paying attention as you're putting money in. Then when you're getting ready to switch over to okay, now I'm in the take the money out part. Okay, so then we are going to again look at, okay, what type of accounts, how much are we going to be taking out, and from where? And those, and then also potentially, do we want to move money from one type of account to another? And those are things that we look at as far as taking out. So types of accounts, time, are you putting it in? Are you taking it out? All of those things affect your taxes. And we look at those kind of things with you.
Inevitable to do, tax planning and looking and proactively managing it. We would love to avoid taxes. You're not going to avoid taxes. Yeah. We do like to have a federal government. We do like to have policemen. We do like to have.
We love our military.
We do like roads.
We love our military. And so we love our roads so, as they are. And we, there are those people in society that are underprivileged. They have hardships in their life. We like to help them too. So you're going to pay taxes. Be thankful that you're paying taxes and plan appropriately.
Well, I feel like a question that might come up quickly that I want to touch on is, we've asked, prospects before, or clients, hey, put your taxes in the vault. Like, let us see, like, having an advisor look at your prior year taxes. What is that like? What does that mean? And have you had questions before from clients or prospects? Like, why do you need it? Why do you need my tax report? Why do you need my filing from the previous year?
So we are not tax professionals. The reason we look at your taxes is we want you to pay your fair share, like all, right? However, we don't want you to overpay. Right. And we want to make sure that you're taking advantage of every single thing that you can if you're earning income to reduce your tax exposure. And on the other side, to minimize taxes on the way out. Again, not tax professionals. Right. We just don't want you to overpay.
Right. Well, and we're fiduciaries too. So that also helps us to verify your income.
True.
And to do our fiduciary duty, that we're not putting you in things that are inappropriate for you.
Well, thank you for listening to today's podcast, One Went the Other Way. You can schedule an appointment with Wanda or Peggy to talk about your taxes, talk about your retirement, talk about your future at financesforlife.com. The schedule the appointment button is in the top right of the page. And you can keep following this podcast every 2 weeks. We post on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advice offered through Finances for Real Life, a registered investment advisor and separate entity from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.